All right, and I think if we follow protocol, we'll start right on time. We're ticking right across 7, and that's a good mark too. We just did over a little over 100 attendees and climbing. So want to just say welcome to our family members. We have some staff and our parents and students that'll be joining us here today. So our point of joining today, and let me go backwards here just for a second as we talk about our presentation and connect with everybody here. And this is our first of a series of our parent nights that we're going to be sharing a little bit about the Hybrid School of Innovation, or the School of Innovation, depending on what grade level you're at. We've got our chat feature there for some questions, and know that we'll do our best to answer those as we can. We are going to be recording this, and then we'll post and share for those family members and students that maybe weren't able to attend tonight. So just know that we'll be doing that. And then our goal with some of those Q&A, if we can't get to them tonight, is to build a FAQ, or to build upon our frequently asked questions there on our school website, so that way we can have those for you ready and available 24/7. So just kind of jumping in right now, we'll talk about introductions first. So my name is Joe Furch. I am the new principal here at the Hybrid School of Innovation. And then joining me tonight to help walk through the program is my assistant principal.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brad Hellickson. I'm the assistant principal at the Hybrid School, and I've been working with the online program for about 12 years.
So you've got a really experienced staff, and we're continuing to grow. So as we can imagine, we're scaling up in a pandemic here, and we'll talk a little bit about the school, but I'm going to walk through really our agenda this today, and what we're going to look at and really the purpose of our meeting today. Know that today is more of a overview and a holistic view. So a little bit of the 30,000 foot level around the virtual school itself, We want to be able to touch on the differences between the virtual and remote that was this past year of 2021, and share a little bit about how that's different, and maybe even some of the similarities, though, that exist in our course-based independent study school here at the Hybrid School of Innovation. We'll talk to you a little bit about the contract that works with the school and our student expectations. We'll touch on parent expectations, a little bit about our learning center, and what that looks like, because again, now that we're bringing everybody under one house, what that will look like for us. Touch on our curriculum platforms, and then maybe even at the end, as we discuss placement, and then if we get a chance, do some Q&A. But that's really the purpose of today. So we're looking at that overview today of the school itself, to share with you a little bit about who we are, what it looks like, and our long established practices. And then as we move on and throughout the summer, we're going to be hosting a series of these parent nights where we'll get into a little bit more of the specifics around programs, and then even get so far as to tailor them a little bit more towards elementary or secondary. Because if you, what's unique about us is that we are a TK through 12 school. We're the only one in the district. So we have some unique properties there. And we want to make sure too, as both our family, staff, parents, and students, that we are targeting our audience to, and making sure that we're giving you the information that you need in the meetings in the most timely fashion. All right, so to talk a little bit about us, so I'm going to just kind of give you a quick overview of the school itself, and what it'll look like heading into next year. So we are going to operate on a traditional calendar, and why I say that is that we have families coming to us from all 50 schools. So we have across the district, we have students and families that are going to be joining us from both year-round schedules and traditional schedules. So know that our school has and will continue to operate on a traditional calendar. What'll be different for us is moves on to the second piece here. Due to the growth in our school, we're going to actually be housed on 2 campuses. So we will be looking at our TK5 teachers and staff being supported and housed over at Citrus Hills. And for supporting our family members, that will be the location that we utilize for that, as well as our learning center there. And then we are already and have been located on the JFK campus, and we're going to continue to do that. And we're going to support our secondary students and staff out of the JFK campus. So know that due to our size and kind of growth, that we are splitting and joining 2 campuses there. So Mr. Hellickson and I will be supporting both. We are a TK through 12 school, and support will look that way. But just for physical housing and being able to support, we're going to be on 2 separate campuses there. But we will support, again, TK 12. What I think it's important to notice too, as we talk about this, is that the Hybrid School of Innovation is entering year 5. So when we talk about doing virtual and what it looks like for us, that for Corona Norco and our hybrid school, this is not a new thing for us. We've been doing this for a number of years. As a matter of fact, just a few weeks ago, we graduated our first set of seniors, and as Mr. Hellickson had the pleasure of announcing her and walking through, we had our first student go 6th grade through 12th grade, our first course-based independent study make it through our program 6th grade and up. So when we think about students that can and will thrive in this, it does happen. We've got proof is in the pudding, so to speak, but know that we're already in year 5. But for Corona Norco, even though the pandemic brought a virtual and remote response, we've actually been working with students, staff, families for a number of years around virtual. And I can share from experience that myself, as Brad's mentioned, he's been doing this for 12 years himself and working on it. I've worked with him in a capacity of developing lessons, curriculum, and we've been doing this a long time for our part-time students. But for full-time students, when we think about kids stepping into that virtual environment and space, ourselves, we've been doing this for 7 years. And then the hybrid school itself has been around for 5. So we have long established practices, systems, and have worked a lot of kinks out. We're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like to operate in our school and how we can share that there. I want you to know, especially as we get into our secondary students and mainly our 9 through 12 families, that our hybrid school of innovation is A through G and NCAA accredited. So that's a big deal for our families as we talk about college and career readiness, scholarships, athletics, those pieces there. So know that that's pieces that are in place and already ready to go that we've had for our students for a number of years. And one thing I want to call out that I think is important, because if we talk about, and I'm going to get into this next, around the difference between the remote and virtual situation is that you have a dedicated administrative and counseling staff. And I think that's important too. That gives you one point of contact for support and what you need to make sure your kids are successful, that you're not visiting different school sites or checking with different families or teachers. It's all going to be from one location, one place. And I think that's important. Now, as I mentioned, I think when we talk about virtual, remote, hybrid, even hybrids built into the school's name, a lot of these terms have had very different meanings for our students and family over the past, almost 18 months now, when we've gone through this pandemic and what it's looked like. So we wanted to front load you as parents and families a little bit around what virtual, remote has looked like and what that was. And then we wanted to use that as a, let's say, groundwork to explain how the course-based independent study, and that's what CBIS means, is different, or some of the ways that it operates in a fashion that maybe some of you are familiar with and maybe some of you aren't, because we have families that have come to us that participated in a completely virtual environment last year. And then we've had some families that were in our remote traditional, where you might have toggled back and forth depending on your school site there throughout the year. So wanted to explain a little bit about why we're spending some time there, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Hellickson to explain the course-based independent study. Now, when we talk about our virtual program here, and this was, when I say virtual remote, this is if you signed up for a program with virtual. When we think about this virtual remote was a way for our students, and it was a pandemic response. So when we think about why we were able to pull off and institute a virtual or a remote program, it was really only possible because there was new legislation, and I call this out under SB 98 because there's some set of rules that existed in how that operated. And one of the things I wanted to share with you was that it sunsets in just a few weeks, about 16 days or so, maybe a little bit more. So at the end of this month, that program will sunset, and those rules and guidance that existed in it will no longer be applicable for school districts to utilize. So know that that was only possible, and the way that those were run only worked through that guidance of SB 98. Whether you were in remote or virtual, that guidance applied to both. And it didn't matter whether you were on either track or either program, that was the guidance that worked. One of the big things that I know is a big question with our families is part of that was the accountability. Was they wanted kids to show up to school, right? They wanted kids to be able to show that they were attending their classes online with their teachers or working with so there was mandatory daily attendance check-in. So your students had to check in. A lot of it was done through Zoom. We got very familiar with how to run those and how to keep those up and running. But that was a piece that was through SB 98. And we'll talk about how that will be different under our program here. And know that, and for our district, the way it looked is you had students, staff, and support spread out across the district. So if you were on a virtual track, you might have, your student is registered to their home school, but you could have, and depending on where you were and what grade level you were at, up to 6 to 7 teachers that were not even on your campus or even associated with your schools, just working to support district-wide. We had nearly 14,000, a little over 14,000 kids. And so to support, that was a district-wide system, not necessarily one for school. So what did that mean? That meant that if you needed to reach out to counselors, teachers, principals, that might mean that you were reaching out to 7 different school sites. So know that that was all really just a pandemic response and possible under there. And that program itself sunsets in just a few weeks and no longer possible. Now, what is possible and continuing is the virtual program that we've utilized for a number of years. And what that will be is our course-based independent study. And then, Brad, I'll turn it over to you. You just let me know when you want me to move the slides forward.
Awesome. I'm ready to go. All right, everybody. So I want to talk to you a little bit about, as Mr. Furch was mentioning, there's a big difference between the COVID response virtual and course-based independent study. So let me talk to you a little bit about the history of this first. Back 8 years ago, there was an increasing demand for students to be able to take virtual classes in the public school. And what that meant was that we might have students that are out of the country. We might have students that are actors and actresses or participating in a sport that has them traveling. Or they might have issues with being on a large campus, social emotional issues, where it's just better to have a student in a virtual learning environment. Well, prior to 7 years ago, there was not a mechanism that would allow us as a public school to be able to offer virtual learning for students. So along comes a change in the law, the Ed Code that governs our schools, and that change was called course-based independent study. And what that allowed us to do was in the public school to be able to offer virtual learning in much the same way that private and charter schools were able to offer that virtual and online learning option. And for us in Corona Norco, we were one of the very first school districts that jumped on board and really helped to figure out how course-based independent study worked. And we piloted some of the very first students. We just graduated our first student this year that started in sixth grade. So we've had a long history with course-based independent study. Now, to kind of explain what this is all about, our virtual learning program is an independent study program, and we are an independent study school. Now, oftentimes when we say independent study, people right away jump to the notion that, well, that's where, kids that are really struggling in school, they wind up in independent study or they go to a continuation school. And that's not at all the case. Course-based independent study was designed for college prep coursework and designed for A through G and NCAA accreditation. So it is not traditional independent study. And one of the key aspects of course-based independent study, and there are a couple of them, is first of all, attendance is not taken by daily check-ins. We're not monitoring when a student does their work or if they're checking in every single day. We're looking at progress benchmarks. And as we go through this tonight, one of the things we'll talk about is that we monitor students daily, but we have very defined 2-week periods that we look at to make sure that students are making what we call satisfactory academic progress. If students are not making academic progress, then we immediately move into an intervention model to try to get the students back on pace. We try to help the students understand and learn and gain the habits necessary to succeed in a virtual environment. And really, when it comes down to it, in a very real sense, success in a virtual environment means that the student develops a set of academic habits that allow them to work independently. And they, to a very large extent, do need to self-monitor how they are proceeding through their curriculum, with the help of our teachers, of course, and phone calls and homerooms and study sessions and all these things that will help to facilitate. But the key to course-based independent study is that, in fact, it is based on a student completing their course of study. Some students work at a faster pace. They complete their coursework early. The coursework is open to students 24/7, and we have had students that need to go to college early, or they are planning a trip that they're leaving early in December, or they have sporting events or other types of. We've even had kids that are out shooting movies and they need to work more rapidly and focus for longer periods of time and get it done early. There's a lot of independence and a lot of flexibility within course-based independent study. But the key is that we monitor and make sure that students are maintaining that academic progress. And again, we have to evaluate every student on about a 2-week basis. Some of the things that we do to support students along the way, each school site will have a learning center. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up here in just a little while, but that is basically a large classroom where students can come in to interact with each other in the case of needing to work on uh, project-based learning, work on projects together, or if they're coming in to get very specific help from a teacher or they're part of an intervention group. They'll be able to schedule time at that learning center and be able to come in, and they'll have access to their teachers there face to face, and they'll have a place to work at the school site. It's not a place for kids to go daily. It's a place for kids to go when they need to utilize the school facility. The other thing that is a requirement under course-based independent study is that students have to fulfill a minimum of 2 live communication contacts per month. In other words, they will be communicating with their teachers 2 times per month, and that is the bare minimum. In practice, and that's a live communication. In practice, they communicate a whole lot more. Teachers have office hours, they're running live sessions for students, but this is the bare minimum requirement. Some students need more contact with their teachers than others do. One of the things that's really critical about course-based independent study that you will find is that we individualize to a very high degree for every single student. But we do have to make sure that they are maintaining that academic progress. Okay. You want to flip to the next slide there, Joe? Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I also wanted to point out here that's going to be different than what a lot of people experienced under the SB 98, the COVID virtual, that had to be put together for a lot of students very quickly. It was a response to the pandemic, and it was a little bit fragmented. There wasn't a consistent approach necessarily between each of the teacher's classes that the student was involved in. There may have been different expectations in one class than the other class. We've been doing this virtual learning now for 12 years, not the COVID response learning, but our core virtual learning. And one of the things that we've learned is that we have to take a cohesive approach to how we present learning for your child. In other words, all of our teachers will be operating from a common syllabus. The expectations for each class will be the same. So a student does not have a totally different set of expectations for their chemistry class than they would for their language arts class. The grading practices are leveled. The expectations for meetings, for contacts, all of those things are common across all of the courses. And in addition to that, all of your students, all of your kids will be using a common platform. There's not going to be a lot of pieced together content that's coming in the form of PowerPoint presentations and PDFs and a lot of different things that are accessible in a lot of different places. It's one common platform that everything will be distributed from. And that means that once a student learns how to navigate through that platform, they've now learned how to navigate that for all of their subsequent classes. And that's very, very important because we want the platform to become somewhat invisible to the learning. And as you know, we all struggle with technology. And if we're going to a lot of different places and there's all kinds of different expectations, just keeping track of all of those different pieces becomes more of the focus than the core learning. And that's the thing we want to eliminate. We want to focus on the learning and the academic progress and sort of make all these other things blend into the background a little bit. And what's really nice about this is that leads us down this pathway of instructional teams, where you might have a chemistry teacher, a language arts teacher, a math teacher, and a history teacher, because all of the practices are common. It does not matter who the student communicates with if they're struggling, because all of our teachers know exactly what the other teachers are doing and what their expectations are. And that's kind of the fundamental piece of common assurances, is this consistent instructional team that your child will be working with. And that kind of forms the core of course-based independent study. We have commonality of platform, we have common assurances, we are building on established practices, and we have instructional teams to support your students. The next piece here that I want to talk to you about, because this is an independent study program, is all students will be provided with a contract. And in that contract, we outline your student's schedule, their course of study, and what the academic expectations are for every single student. And the contract is good because it works both ways. Our goal is, of course, to ensure that your student is progressing academically. And when we look at the contract, because of this idea of academic progress, satisfactory academic progress, it's actually part of state law. We look at how your student is progressing, and if they're not doing well as a virtual student, if they're not developing the habits that allow them to be able to work independently and be able to work with technology, our first step under that contract is to begin a program of intervention where we step in at that 2-week point and we say, we're going to try X, Y, and Z. And we work with you to get an intervention program in place for that student, and then we customize and we individualize for your learner. If that does not work, then we hit the point to where we say, this placement is not appropriate. Your student is not thriving in this placement in virtual learning and is not actually able to make satisfactory academic progress, at which point in time, under state law, we have to place your student in an alternative program, whether that be a traditional independent study or whether it be a face-to-face classroom. We cannot keep students in this program that are not thriving. And that's not us being mean, and this is a little bit of tough love. This is actually part of the state law that we have to operate under. The turnaround is the same for you. We've had many, many questions about, well, what if, I decide I don't want my child involved in this virtual program anymore? Do I have the option to exit it? And the answer is, the contract works for you as well. And you can say at any time, because this is an optional program that you are opting for, you can tell us, this isn't working for my child, they're really struggling, I need to go back to traditional learning, and at which point in time, we need to exit you back to a traditional learning environment. Now, one of the things I will point out about our curriculum is that in most cases, we've strived to assure that the curriculum that we are providing parallels what's being offered in the brick and mortar classrooms. So in most cases, we can exit your student back to a brick and mortar environment, and they will pick up right where they left off. We've tried to very carefully build a consistent experience. One of the things I will tell you, though, is that we do cover more content in virtual learning than is covered sometimes in the traditional classroom, because we don't have fire drills, we don't have sleepy teacher days, we don't have subs, we don't have all those things that sometimes take away from the learning at the school site. You are getting a full curriculum and covering all of the standards in what we cover in our classrooms, in our virtual classrooms. Back to the contract, the duration of that contract will be 1 year, at which point in time you decide if you want to continue or not. And we renew the contract every single year. And the maximum we can offer under any independent study program in the state of California is a 1-year contract. And that doesn't mean that after 1 year, goodbye, see you later. It just means that the following year, we sign another contract. And I will caution you all about this right from the very beginning, and we expect this. One of the things that we cover at the beginning of the year with your students is habits. We talk about the 7 habits of highly effective teens through our homeroom environment. We cover some curriculum that helps you to help your student develop the habits necessary to be effective in a virtual learning environment. So we don't just throw you to the wolves there. We're going to help your kid to get through, your student to get through that transition period where they have to become an independent learner. And honestly, it takes a little bit of time. Some of our kids that were in virtual have got it down, man. They're ready to go. They're ready to continue with this. If you struggle a little bit in virtual, we're going to be there to support you and help you get those habits in place. If you're brand new to virtual, you can expect there to be a little bit of a transition, but we're going to help you through that. And it takes a few weeks for a student to get comfortable with and understand how that virtual learning piece works. So just be aware of that. That's coming.
All right, and part of what I was going to touch on is talking about parent expectations. And again, we're trying to keep up with the questions in the chat. And if we don't get a chance to get to them today, know that again, we'll be answering those through an FAQ and put those up. But what I wanted to talk to you about again is our parent expectations, that when we think about what this looks like from a larger scale, right? A TK through 12 role, that as a parent, just like any other piece, that your role as that child's learning coach is more involved as the student is younger, and then as the students themselves become more developed, cognitively prepared and able to access and work a little bit more on that independently, they will see that your role, slide a little bit farther away from that hands-on piece as the student reaches closer to 12th grade. But that's part of it, right? We're talking about the academic support. All of our kiddos need your support when we are going through these courses and programs. Motivation is a big one, right? Where we work closely with our families. That's everybody from myself, Mr. Helix, and our counselor. All these are working to reach out to families and connect with you to make sure our students are staying on track and making progress. And then we talk about guidance as well. That when we talk about this being self-paced, I mean, that's part of it, right? When we think about the amount of time that a student can work on a sort of a self-paced piece, that increases as the student gets older. And that is a shorter period of time as the student is in our younger and elementary grades. And that's a little bit more of a hands-on piece where in our younger grades, that learning coach model and that parent support is vital to the student's success. So when we think about it as well, when your student's at home, that's a proper learning environment, that it's as best as possible, free of distractions, a place where they can focus and engage in that work to stay on track with their assignments. When we talk about their coursework, that we're checking in with them, and our teachers are working in a very similar fashion to ensure pacing, communicating with you around what that looks like for a given time. Could be a few days, could be a week, based on the amount of progress and time that they're releasing to students. And then also working to communicate with our teachers. We do quite a bit to push out information to our families on a weekly basis, and then more so on a teacher level when they get information to you to make sure you understand where your kids are at. Our upper level platforms have the ability for parents to check in and be able to observe and see where their students are at. So we have those accounts and can work with you on that. And then part of that too, with parent expectations and orientations, is that towards the beginning of the school year, before we get started, we hold our parent orientation to make sure that you're on board and you know how you can best support your students. So know that that's a part of when we engage in this work and our kids are looking at a virtual environment, that you as their parent are sort of that triad of support, working with our counseling administrative support, our teachers, and you. All of this work together to be able to connect. And when we receiving that contract works in our orientation and registration. So those things will be coming out. So that's a little bit about the parent expectations. So now we wanted to touch a little bit on the learning center. So this would be a new piece that we have established at both our sites there. When we talk about that, I'm going to shift over here to Mr. Hellickson, and he'll touch base on the learning centers.
Forgot to unmute myself. Okay, so our learning centers, we're going to have learning centers at both of our campuses, and they are big, beautiful classrooms with nice furniture in them, and brightly colored walls. Are going to be beautiful places for kids to come and work. Students will schedule their time in the learning center because we obviously have to have, we have a capacity limit in the learning center. It's not something that's envisioned for students to come to every day. It's not a place to come in lieu of in-person instruction. It's there to be used by students when they need to be in contact with their teacher, or they need to work in small groups, or when teachers are actually requiring them to come in, should that be part of an intervention plan. If we have a student that's, say, struggling and is just not getting into that habit of virtual learning, part of the intervention plan may be that the student does have to report to the learning center 2 days a week or 3 days a week, however that's set up. It could be different for every single student. To actually be under the guidance of a teacher until they develop the habits necessary to be successful in their courses. Again, you'll be signing up for time. Students can sign up through a particular teacher, through the counselor, or through administration. We will also have a voluntary sign-up form that's available with a certain number of slots that are available for kids to come in on an as-needed basis. Again, these are classrooms. They will be monitored. We will have educators in the classroom, not necessarily your child's teachers, but they will be in the classroom. Your child's teachers will be on site and accessible for your student. So the learning centers, again, are there as a support piece. They're not there as a replacement for the in-person classroom, because your students are virtual, but they're there when they are needed for a variety of different reasons. And then in terms of our learning platforms, we have been doing a lot of work with our learning platform vendors this year. And as you know, we've had some pros and cons with our virtual learning platforms. And we have been, the Edgenuity software for 6 through 12, we've been using that for 4 years with our Hybrid School of Innovation, actually 3 years with our Hybrid School of Innovation. So we're very comfortable with that. Our K through 5 software, we've been spending a lot of time with our vendors to help flesh that out and revise it. And it's really turning into a spectacular product for us, K through 5. And then our TK platform will be the OWL program, which if there are any TK parents here, you'll become familiar with that. I think it's something you're going to really enjoy. It's a very high quality virtual TK program. The other platform that we will be using for some electives for our 6 to 12 is Odysseyware. And as you know, if you have any students that are taking summer school virtually right now, they're working in Odysseyware right now. We use Edgenuity and Odysseyware sort of interchangeably because they are the same company. It's that some of the courses that are available in Odysseyware are not available in Edgenuity. So we do use those two somewhat interchangeably. And so you can expect to be seeing both of those platforms depending upon the courses that your student is taking. Any supplemental material will be delivered entirely through Canvas, and Canvas primarily for 6 to 12, and Google Classroom primarily for our TK to 5 students. So you might see a little bit of Canvas and Google Classroom, but it will be spelled out very clearly in the syllabi that we provide your students, and they'll know exactly what to put in each of these and what information to access from each of these supplemental learning management platforms.
And I'll touch on this one here as we talk about some of the platform supplementals. I saw this was a question earlier as we talk about what, in addition to the platforms there, as Mr. Hellickson was talking about, there's some other pieces that we use to help build up the curriculum, tie a little more closely to the brick and mortar structures and content there that we see and we want our kids to have access to. And part of that is to make sure that in a virtual space that our kids have access to these lessons and materials. So we use in the secondary for our students there 6 through 12, we use a platform called Turnitin, and that's mainly for our written work. And that's part of for students to get immediate feedback, help as we talk about academic integrity and students owning their work and resources there, that they have the ability to get feedback and pieces for their learning in the literacy and really for any class, that they can get that immediate feedback there. We also have social emotional lessons that we'll be pushing forward through some of those platforms there for our students, because we know, I mean, if this pandemic taught us anything, is that really what school has always been about, right? But I think really what the pandemic did was bring a little bit more towards the forefront there, how important working with the whole child is. And so you can see that both in elementary and secondary level, we'll be working with our kids and families there around those social emotional lessons. Elementary too, we're going to work with the district. We will be continuing with Studies Weekly, Mystery Science, Raz Kids. Those will all be programs that we continue to support and engage our families with and our kids in the curriculum. So know that those will continue as they were in the pandemic part to be a part of our program. So we have those set aside for you. When we talk about what we're going to be getting into there as far as schedules and placements, I wanted to touch base on this because I know there are some of those questions there that we are working to address and answer. So I will tell you that when we talk about our schedules, because I saw what was that look like. We have a dedicated counseling staff. We're going to be bringing on an additional part-time counselor. So that's upcoming. So we will have that person be joining our staff soon that will continue to help us be able to support and push those schedules out. That I can tell you too, as we talk about our virtual school and scaling. So we are scaling up the school and scaling our practices. And that part of that means working with our families and needs, and that sort of, to be honest, as we've seen some of the shifts in the restrictions, some of our enrollment has been fluid. So we've been trying to work with our families as those requests come in and get to you as soon as possible. So know that we're working with that in our specialized programs to meet and connect and get that information to you as soon as possible. Our goal always will be to kind of have this front run and start it a little sooner for our families. But when we think about our virtual school and we push this out for our families and getting those information pieces out to you, is for most schools that came out sooner than we had the opportunity to get it out to you. When we talk about who our enrollment was and being able to have our families there was a little behind our traditional schedule. So I know in a more traditional program, well, no matter what school you're at, you're used to having some of this a little sooner. We understand that, and I appreciate the grace going through that. But part of it is our run up to this was a little bit more of a short runway. So know that that's coming, but we're continuing to work out that, and you will hear from us. And we're making sure that those are built out. And just like every other student and every other classroom and school site, students will be able to access their schedules prior to school starting. And typically it's usually about 6 days prior to school beginning that they open that up district wide. And that's a district policy in the way that's set up. So know that we have that, and we're working with our staff and getting all of those courses placed and resources in the hands of our teachers and then in the hands of you. And we're gathering up those materials there. There was a question when we talked about what it looked like, because we have some families that I know were joining us tonight, as I spoke to some people and gave out the link that were interested in the program themselves and wanted to know more about how to join up. Or then I saw some families, based on the information tonight, or if they had any questions and wanted to, change what they were thinking, what would they do about that. So if you did need to either request or rescind placement based on some of that information there, these are the things and how you could go about doing that. It would be emailing our Hybrid School of Innovation email with this information, the student's name, ID number, and just a brief statement around that placement and what you're looking to do. So wanted to make sure we mentioned that for families, because we have families on both ends tonight taking a look at the information that we're presenting and sharing that with you. For some of you a little bit more in depth today, because maybe this is the first time you're hearing a little bit more about virtual because you, pardon me, were remote or traditional, and taking the chance to examine that. So we wanted to ensure that you had that information and had a process to go through there. Now, when we talk about some of these pieces here, I'm going to click over here. Those are the crux of it. And like I said, the goal for today is mainly to engage in our parents tonight to talk a little bit about what it is our program is. And we know there's a lot of information to put at you. And we very much know that this is a, like I said, 30,000 foot level, and there's a lot of detailed questions. We're going to save this chat today. So know that we're going to try and get through as much as can. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting this together as an FAQ. So on our Hybrid School of Innovation website, we have the district FAQ around virtual, and we will be taking these questions and the ones that were posed today in the Q&A and building out a frequently asked question, because there's just simply not enough time to dive into most of these. But know that we're continuing to build it out. We'll have that there. The information's been updated, but that we will house that located on our school website. When we talk about just seeing a few pieces there to review, learning centers are located on both campuses. So know that, yes, we have that set aside for both sites. First day of school is, I want to say, August 10th, following the traditional calendar. So we know we have those. I'm seeing a lot of questions there as we talk about and I know Brad's taking care of that when we talk about the honors and developing it, because some of these too, when we talk about our program scaling up and building, is that we are looking at this to grow and develop our pathways for our kids to make sure they're successful, because we need to make sure that they're going to be academically successful in a course-based independent study. That for our kids, when they join these honors and AP classes, that we have our staff is properly trained, that we have the curriculum in place for them to be able to engage with, and that all of those things are set up and ready for a kid to be successful. And again, talking about the schedules, those are being built. So just like other schools, those are all being built and plugged in. So the schedules that we push out to families would follow the same process that we would see at the other programs and school districts and schools around the district, that they get pushed out prior to school. When we talk about and I know there was a couple questions around graduation in the FAQs for our seniors, because I know we do have a lot of senior families here tonight. There are some pieces there that we address in the FAQs around what that looks like. There's some exceptions that the district is working on specifically for this class of 2022. But know that I saw that piece around transcripts. The transcripts will be your school. So the transcripts will say the Hybrid School of Innovation. Now, as far as the graduation and homes and what that looks like there are some exceptions there. We do cover that in our frequently asked questions there. And yes, we do have special education teachers, counselors, psychologists. All those services are still available through our hybrid school. And they're working and meeting together right now. I can tell you that they're doing a lot of work on the back end, and they'll be reaching out to families as we talk about upcoming placement and all those pieces there. So know that we have all those pieces available. And we are building out, and Mr. Hellickson touched on that there. We have, and so for some of our kids, I know that's a great question there. We're working with our elementary, so we talk about workbooks. Yes, we're going to have workbooks for our elementary grade levels, working through the companies themselves. So we're working with our publishers as well as our teachers to talk about workbooks and how we'll be set those pieces in place. Some of those are being set up with the company or turning to be digital components that are interactive, that don't require submissions and written pieces. So we are looking at those and working with our staff and students, our staff really around what's going to be the best mode of submission for our students. So as we talk about that, for the most part, all of these things are self-contained in our program there, and we try and keep most of those things virtually. Now, I know there's a lot of questions there, and we're going to see those things continue to come. But yes, I appreciate that. Some of the ones we talk about there. I think this is a good one to mention because I saw it come up in a couple of pieces there. Is this a permanent option? And I think that's important to note that this is a CNUSD school and continuing our virtual learning that we've been establishing as a school. We've already graduated our first set of seniors. We're going through our WASC accreditation. And when we start talking about the long-term plan, for me, this and my full intention is to keep this as a program and as a school that has long history as we continue on. So there are no plans for this to disappear. This is not a pandemic response or school. So we are established and will continue to be established long beyond. And my hope is, when this pandemic sunsets. So know that this is not just a temporarily generated solution like the virtual remote that we saw before. And I think that's part of the context we were hoping to build. I know graduation, because we got a lot of seniors that I can tell you the district is already starting to take a look at next year and where that was going to be. This year, we were able to house our graduation on our site here at JFK. But again, with the numbers that we're looking at next year, we're going to be looking at a new venue. So what that will look like is yet to be determined. I know Mr. Hellickson was touching on that, because that is, as we talk about this will be something new for us and we grow into. We will keep you informed and make sure that we're connecting with parents, but we're just getting into that work there, as are the rest of the school sites, because plenty of pieces to be addressed and worked out through there. Yes, it will have their own yearbook and class picture. We'll be working with those. We did that through our student pieces there, and know that that's something too that we're looking to grow into, is that student leadership, engagement, student involvement. I saw something there too about connecting with their peers. We're going to be looking and working with our families around building additional opportunities for kids to interact and meet and build that social component outside of the regular classroom there. I've seen the question come across there around texting and connecting with teachers. Yes, I mean, the teachers are here, and that's where we're trying to make sure, again, you've got your teachers are going to be reporting the school day. When we look at it, that was approved through the district, will work from 8:30 to 2:40 is our bell schedule from our TK up. And their teachers, as Mr. Hellickson pointed out, that they are going to establish with you what the best mode of contact is going to be. Laptops, that is going to be, again, as the district has shifted to a more of a one-to-one environment with Chromebooks, we are working with the districts. That will be something that we work to connect with you. If you're a high school student, yes, it would be through JFK. More to come on that, but know that the district itself and our IT department is working on its best practices for delivering and collecting those laptop devices for our students. So yes, you will be able to get one there. So I'm gonna, as we're looking at that, yes, I'm seeing that we're gonna know that, again, we recorded this session here. The pieces there. One of the things too, when we talk about the Chromebook platform, and that's something too our instructional ed services department can help address more. But yes, the idea is they're still working out what those pieces are going to look like as we continue on. But when we talk about access to different curricular pieces, we'll be working with you and our school sites. There is a way on a Chromebook that the district has done. It's a virtual way to connect to some of those Microsoft products through the Chromebooks there. And again, a lot of these are detailed things. Continue to put them in there. We've captured a number of different pieces, and I know we could spend a great deal of time touching on all these individual questions. When we get when we talk about high school registration, that's ongoing, that I know you will hear information come out from the district around registration and high school registration. That when we take care of that, when we talk about Edgenuity, know that, because this question, I see that does not fulfill state core curriculum. We are very much accredited. That there was a question around what that looks like. All of our courses go through board approval and meet to address and certify that your kids, when they're graduating, are meeting full A through G. And we mentioned that earlier, full A through G and NCAA accreditation. That we have worked to make sure that all of that will be a off the plate, or say not a concern for your families. That we've done that, and we have done that with our students have graduated, gone on to some very prestigious universities, and are set up. I see there was a piece there around Citrus Hills direct number. Those things are being established. So there's a Citrus Hill number, and our staff's getting set up, and our facilities are being built out there. So yes, we will have the information available on our website. They do not need to meet in person. Like physically. So Brad, sorry, thank you, Brad, if you wanted to touch on that one.
Yeah, twice a month they are required to, the minimum amount of communication is 2 times per month. It's going to be more than that, but that communication can be fulfilled virtually as well. Does not have to be face-to-face in the classroom, but it does have to be synchronous live communication.
There you go. Clarify, are they a part of their homeschool? So when you are joining the hybrid School of Innovation or our intermediate and elementary, you might just see School of Innovation on your piece there. That is your new homeschool. So you are transferring to the school. So you would not be a part of the homeschool you would be transferring from. The website, we can put it in there, but if you Google just CNUSD HSOI, it will come right up. It's built into the district website. So all of your school websites are set up there. And at the beginning there, we talked about that we have CNUSD HSOI. We'll be posting this video there as well for our families and staff. There is, and again, to other pieces, and we're going to do more this summer when we talk about that. When we talk about the homeschool like curriculum pieces, is that yes, we monitor our progress through Edgenuity, as Brad pointed out, and then yes, there still are some connections for our homeschools as far as some of those athletics, and that is touch base on our FAQ there. And yes, so more meetings and Zooms closer to the start of school. Like I said, we're going to have a parent orientation. Today was just more or less a introductory meeting. We know there was a lot of questions. This is all good for us, and we can start to build some of these things out in our FAQ. We wanted to, hear from you, our families, and see what it is that we had some questions and how we can work to better address those. So that was part of today. As we work our way closer to the meeting, we're going to hold additional meetings. Like I said, one's geared more towards elementary and some geared more towards secondary, because I know we're trying to do quite a large cross section there. So I see some of these questions kind of, bubbling up again. We're going to save the chat. Student ID, that would all be through the student services. So know that piece there. As I mentioned, we'll collect these pieces there and start to build out our FAQ for our parents. So that know that all of those, we're going to do our best to get through it and keep you connected. So stay tuned, check with our website. We're going to be pushing updates through our school social media. So if you've got that, if you've got different places, and again, it's just CNUSD HSOI. I'm saving some of those. And I know that, again, we've got for our families there that we'll work on that. I see pieces there about trying to tailor our FAQ more towards our specific groups, and I appreciate that feedback, and we'll look to do that. But for tonight, I'm going to kind of bring it to a close. We'll capture that. I promise you that we'll continue to make sure that we're connecting with you. And we appreciate that. We had quite a few parents here tonight, so thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to a great year. There's a lot to be done. Know that, again, if you need to connect with us, Googling or just connecting with CNUSD HSOI will get you right to us. So more to come. We'll keep connected with you. We appreciate the passion that you, our family, students, and teachers have. And that as we continue to push things out, know that we're going to make sure that you're in the loop, and that we're going to do our best to continue to answer all these questions as we look to have a productive and successful year for all our kids, TK-12. So thank you so much, families.